how we now recover and go back to the whole job creation. Am I going off the subject? But I think, certainly it has affected our sector, the live music sector, tremendously. The loss of people, the suicide rate has risen. Musicians have lost homes, can't pay school fees. The support structures around the live performance, it just ended, and we're in a very, very serious position. But coming back to me, the company I started, it was beautiful rock and roll, but I've also decided that there's so much knowledge I need to chill a bit that I've got that I need to impart with others. So I've been working with people in Mozambique, in Nigeria, and in Ongala, and imparting knowledge to younger producers, promoters, especially in the area of administration, because we have enough technical people and musicians and that aspect, but technically running it, sustaining it, making money, because that's what we are about as well, business people. Yeah, that's what I do. Sorry.
Thank you. And maybe, Dudu, you can tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Aziza. Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Good. So the rain didn't dampen our spirits last night. Dudu Sarr from Dakar, West Africa, Senegal, the francophone side of this continent. About 25 years in the music industry, most of it spent alongside my big brother Youssou N'Dour, who I think the last trip I was on this country was playing at Rashid's festival in Cape Town. So I've been working with him for the last, well, we've been together for quite some time, but I've been managing Youssou for 12 years now, so I must be doing something right to be able to stand for 12 years. And then in the last 3 years, I had this mad idea just before COVID to start my own festival and music conference similar to ACCES. ACCES is a big brother, and Dakar Music Expo is a younger brother of ACCES, which takes place in Senegal once a year, normally in February, but last year we did it in June because of COVID. And we're coming back in February from the 3rd to the 6th. So all of you guys are invited to Dakar, West Africa in February, and I hope to see you. So that's a bit about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Can move on to Moreira.
Hi, my name is Moreira Chonguiça, and Rashid comes to play. You spoke about Rashid. I think the first festival I played in my life, like bigger than life, Rashid took us the North Sea Jazz Festival. So then a few years later, they found Cape Town International. I wanted just to add that I'm also the creator and the founder of the Morejazz Series. It's a jazz festival in Mozambique that has been converted into the Maputo International Jazz Festival. So, and I think I'm very privileged African because I lived 19 years in Cape Town. Now I'm back in Mozambique. So I feel and understand the social dynamics of our business from both sides that are completely different. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Walter.
Thank you. My name is Walter Wanyanya. I feel like I'm kind of, the younger version of my brother. I always call him my big brother. I kind of have the same history or trajectory in entertainment. So I was managing or still manage his late now, Dr. Oliver Mtukutsi's business. So I was his manager for the last 5 years of his life up until he passed away. So I still manage his portfolio and everything that he has to do with Tuku music in Zimbabwe. The founder of Jakaranda Music Festival in Harare, which happens every October, and also Jabulani Jazz Festival, which happens every April. But yeah, it's an honor to be here, and also, it's good to be on the same panel with Mr. Rashid. I was introduced to him by Brayu Masekela at the Masekela Jazz Heritage Festival, I think, what, five years ago?
Sweet.
Yeah. So it's really good to be here. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. And maybe just a note for the audience, if you have any pending questions throughout the discussion, just make note of them and we'll come back to them in the end. So we'll move on to our very first question, which I will probably direct to all of us. If we could give, maybe not so much Rashid, because you already had a chance to talk about the situation here locally, but to some of us that come from different parts of the region, just a general overview of the situation of the creative and music industry as players post-COVID, or I shouldn't say post, because we're actually still in the thick of it, to get a general feel of what's happening around the region. We can start off with you.
Okay, well, in Senegal, I think it's pretty much the same as anywhere else when it comes to live music. We've had periods of, lockdown where hardly any live music gig took place in the country, and that was the case until recently. In our case, in the case of Youssou, he hasn't performed for the last 2 years in Senegal. That doesn't mean to say that there weren't any concerts. In fact, I mean, in the last 2-3 months, we've had, all the restaurant, the usual circuit in Senegal has had all concerts, and much, relief to the musicians who haven't been able to be out for quite some time. But as far as, Youssou, I mean, I also look after Orchestra Baobab as well. They've been more busy. They've been playing pretty much every Friday, Saturday, Sunday in the last 3 months. But overall, I think, like anywhere else in the world, Senegal has been very badly affected by this pandemic. I think, the entertainment industry is probably one of the worst hit sectors by the pandemic. Hopefully, there's talk of this new variant, so God forbid that this creates, wreaks havoc in and around the world. But, we've announced our first gig on the 5th of December, and I hope we will get to do that. So we'll see, fingers crossed, but, let's go and find those scientists with a, cure, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, just the word COVID, man, make me to, so yeah, very badly, very severely affected the industry, I think, right across the board, and Senegal is no exception.
And maybe you can give us a little bit of insight if the same is happening in Mozambique.
I'm going to sound repetitive because it's the same, but it's important to understand that the social dynamics of the SADC bloc and the West Africa, although we are the same, they're very different. Let me speak about Mozambique and South Africa. The creative industry in Mozambique is subsidized. It's not self-sustainable. It's subsidized by who? By the telecommunications companies, the Vodacoms themselves, the Movitels, that put up the concerts, then banks, okay? So, there is a new trend that came in the last 5-6 years for the new generation of artists, The Mozambican population from 0 to 35 years represents almost 40%. So the artists really survive from playing weddings. Do you get what I'm saying? The more, like I would say, the quiet or the house music, it's weddings. So that's why I'm saying the dynamics of the industry are a bit different, okay? So now, when COVID came, Mozambique wasn't affected by COVID immediately. Of course, it was coming. So we always have a presidential decree 30 in South Africa. And now the last one was done on the 25th of October, where the president allowed for music venues, museums, movie theaters, and performances for up to 40% capacity of the room. Rashid was mentioning here about 2,000 people outdoor and 500 indoor. That won't happen. But we have one thing that attracts, and which is our beaches. We have a long coastal line, and this long coastal line is a big asset for the creative and music industry. But the president opened on the 25th of October. 2 weeks later, he had to close because that is a big problem. People go to the beach, yes, you have a concert, but so you had to close. So, and that automatically, when you close the beach, you kill everything. So now I hear rumors, because December is coming, as you said, the fourth wave probably thinking and open a few, But now we're talking about South Africa. Everybody that is in Mozambique, that is seeing Moreira in South Africa, they say, hey, I don't want to be close to you when you come back. Do you understand? So it's the same, but it is a huge problem. It is a huge problem, and this will prevail. So time has come for the African Union and the SADC and all these institutions to come together. We really to find a way, because this is the 4th, tomorrow will be the 6th, after tomorrow will be the 7th. Senegal maybe will be in June, God forbid, as maybe tomorrow. So yeah, that's what it is.
Interesting. And Walter, what's the situation in Zimbabwe like?
I think, Zimbabwe is very much next door, and so is Mozambique. Southern Africa we're very close knit. So that's probably why you've seen that the discovery, or whatever you want to call it, of the new variant kind of has a blanket effect on everybody. We haven't really had any reports of it being anywhere else but South Africa, but you can already see the effects that when things are put on and restrictions are put on, it's put on on everybody. So like what my brother said, I'll be repeating myself because the situation is the same almost everywhere. So I think we need to look at solutions that are gonna help everybody, because we're not in isolation. No country lives in isolation. So whatever affects Mozambique affects Zimbabwe, whatever affects Zimbabwe affects South Africa, and vice versa, and that kind of thing. So what we need to do now is to look at solutions that are gonna help everybody all at the same time, because there's no way that we can separate ourselves and say, oh, in Zim, this is what's happening, so let's just look at solutions that help Zimbabweans only, or Mozambicans only, or, so we just have to look at as a collective and see how we're gonna live with this virus and how we can work together to make sure that we all stay in business and we all stay, doing what we love to do and what people enjoy doing. Yeah.
Thank you. And just maybe to give the audience and the panelists a little insight on what's happening in Tanzania. Actually, I think we're quite unique in the sense where throughout the whole COVID, we haven't actually had any lockdowns. We never had quarantining, and other than the fact that we lost our president whilst in office, life has pretty much gone on as normal. However, in saying that, the live music industry in Tanzania is not what it used to be in the 80s, or I would say the 90s. We actually don't have much of a live music industry as such, but that's for different reasons and not really based on COVID. So just a little insight on our unique experience from the rest of the region. So maybe we can go on to some leading strategies, best practices, progress and challenges in relation to the road to recovery. If we are to call it recovery, or if it's something that we are now going to have to live with. Maybe I could direct this question to Dudu and Rashid.
What was the question? The road to recovery?
Yes, and leading strategies, best practices, and progress now that we are living with COVID.
You know what? I have no idea what the road to recovery is, to be honest. And in terms of policy making, for me, the single most important thing is for our governments to understand that what happens in Europe is not to be copied, like literally, in Africa. That for me is, if they manage to understand it, if we manage to get that message across. In Senegal, it's a joke now, but whenever France makes a decision the same day, it's applied in Senegal. And in a way, it makes no sense in whichever way you look at it. I've seen markets, you're talking about Tanzania and life being, as normal throughout the pandemic. It was pretty much the same during the day in Senegal. If you went to any marketplace, it was heaving with people, yet you couldn't have performances in clubs and restaurants. And that just doesn't make sense. So what kind of criteria is they applying to apply that shutdown? So for me, in terms of, getting policymakers to get our attention, is telling them, we've got a very specific kind of context and it has to be treated as such. And I think for me, that's how we can survive as an industry. And of course, you know, we suffer kind of disunity and lack of cohesion and representation and all the rest of it. I mean, at least in the case of Senegal, I mean, I think the community is very much divided in many ways. So to have some sort of an impactful strategy is always going to be a challenge. But for me, it is the most important thing, not to be copycats of, you know, what is happening in Europe, you know, blanket solutions for everyone. And it just simply doesn't work. And the way we suffer is I mean, I think we suffer probably more than, when I look at, you know, the West and the developed world and all of these supportive measures they've had in terms of grants and money that's been pumped to rescue the industry. We're nowhere near. I mean, in normal times, we don't have, you know, 1/10 of, 1,000 of the resources that they have. So why would we apply the same rules? It just simply doesn't make sense. So for me, the road to recovery is having our own locally adapted measures and strategies. Yeah.
Definitely, I think I'll echo that, and I think that's why our former president actually decided that we weren't going to have quarantine and we weren't going to have, what do you call it?
Lockdown.
Lockdown, yeah, sorry, because it wouldn't work for the majority of the people. People live from day to day, and it just would cause more chaos than help. And if I can come to you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, last point that Dudu picked up on, that the sector, there was no business rescue at all. There was business rescue in all the other sectors of business, but except in the creative industry, and that's why we're the first to shut down, and we're the last to open. In fact, we haven't opened up. But just in terms of, you know, the transformation of it, and which is very challenging for me, you know, having to sit alone in my room. You've got a big TV, but you're watching a live stream. Now, first time it was great. Second time it was okay. Third time it was a novelty. Fourth time I couldn't any longer, you know. But you paid it because it's quite cheap as well. It was quite good. Everything's online in support of the musicians. But then if you really look at it, well, when you start looking back and talking to the musicians, they actually don't make money out of it. And it's interesting, the kind of research being done by in the UK, the Musicians Union, that the record labels make all the money and not the musicians. But here in South Africa, we also have a big challenge because data is very expensive. And, you know, for people to access it on your phone, it's like almost impossible. So the question is not how do you get back to the norm? That's the live music, where you go into the venue, you smell the sweat next to you, you smell the booze, you smell the smoke, you smell the music. You know, when do we get back to that? And I think that's like a major challenge. It can be done, I think, from the kind of presentation I done and the steps. Might be smaller, but, you know, at least we kickstart the industry again.
Thank you. And following on to what was actually discussed, which you might have to answer the same thing. What are the areas of cooperation and solidarity? Are there any networks of support that can support the live music industry? And you can just build on that with whatever.
Are there any areas of support I mean, you tell us, are they networks? Are they for live musicians? Is there anywhere they can go where they can get help? I don't think there's help coming. there's no help coming for live music. You know, like what Rashid said, we're the last ones to, you know, we're the first ones to be shut down and the last ones to be allowed to open up. But I think, you know, gatherings are always going to happen. People are always going to happen. We're in Africa. You know, where we come from, there's no way you can say there's social distancing. You can have one household where you will find there's 3 families living in one household. How do you social distance from that? And it's not an easy thing to social distance in Africa. and say, everybody stay in your home and don't interact with people and that kind of thing. So it's the same when it comes now to entertainment. We're very social beings, we're very social animals, so we need to be together, we need to gather together and sing together, and you'll see how the Cape Town Jazz Festival affects a huge part of Cape Town's creative economy, not even just the creative economy. Flights are full, hotels are full, restaurants are full, just because the festival is happening in that month or that week. And the same everywhere with any industry. Like even now, South Africa, just because this is happening, the four of us have had to fly. Actually, the whole panel here had to fly. So which means that the airlines benefit. We're all staying in hotels. Hotels benefit. So there's huge benefits for the economy that you will see in cities, in countries, because events are happening and because festivals are happening and because live events are happening. So it can't be ignored. You can't just say, oh, we're just having fun. It's not just fun. It's huge contributions to the economy, and the governments need to take serious look into how we can be considered as part of solutions, or look and see that, live events happen, because we contribute so much into economies and how the ecosystem works. So we can't just say, because people are having fun, people are drinking, it's just that. It's more than that, when you look at the bigger picture. So help, I don't see help coming, because nobody's taking us seriously, and they don't think that we need the help. And because I guess sometimes we don't make noise about it.
Okay, and so maybe you could build on what he was saying. There's no help, no networks.
No, I think the only help is us. Let's make a decision today and shut down. No radio plays our music anyway for 1 week in entire Africa. Then you'll see the world giving us special attention. The world's population is young, 80%. Africa is no exception. He explained, my colleague, about the models used in Europe are different. My situation in Mozambique is totally different. In Maputo, I'm actually a privileged musician. I don't represent 90% of Mozambican musicians, not even South African musicians. You also know the same, okay? So we are privileged. I'm not discrediting the work we do. So we have a big responsibility, because there's a million youth endures creating in this last 12 years you've been working. With your festival, the same. There is a million Masikelas created. There's a younger generation that needs to be taken care of. And we have to accept that this situation is not going to change. It's going to evolve, change names, and et cetera, et cetera. So for me, I'm not here trying to say that I expect some sort of help, but at least that we preserve. The last thing I want to do is a phenomenal sculptor or artist that, because of this situation, he sees Moreira complaining about life and he's going to work in the bank. Then you don't have a society. That's what's going to happen, and it's happening as we're speaking. So I believe that maybe one thing that Europe has done well with the brands, we need some sort of funding, not for live performance, but at least to preserve the ego and the spirit, to say that the spirit of the artist, that yes, better days are coming. The other thing that scares me is that, I don't know in South Africa, but in Africa, when you speak about culture, it's becoming very politicized as well. And that scares me, because the world is evolving in such a velocity with the evolution of technology. Do you understand? That this thing of COVID, it's a fantastic excuse to reduce the speed and exposure of creativity created by the expression of society and artists and such. So my main worry now, I'm learning to live with this. I'm not happy, but I'm worried about the schools that we have in South Africa. I work with many, there's millions of kids in Mozambique and Zimbabwe that end up going and work for the customs at the borders. Do you understand? And people, there were a lot of interviews. Moreira, when are you doing your live stream? I've never done a live stream. I'm not interested. We record, then we publish if we want, but I don't, because of the reasons that Rashid said. But I'm really worried on the next generation, the kids that are 14, 16, the amount of creativity that is coming. If this continues like this, top artists dying with no help, these kids are going to give up. And then in 10 years' time, I don't know what will happen with Africa. We are not doing the jazz festival this year. I don't think we'll do it next year because the priority of my partners and my sponsors is to finance vaccines. But now you're saying you get vaccinated, but now you're saying that someone who got the 2 doses of one is back sick or died. So I think the future is in the next generation. Sorry.
No, I mean, what you're saying is very important, and I think you touched upon, you know, the fact that you're not interested in doing anything digital, and maybe that's something that we can discuss. I mean, are they
if
digital?
it's sponsored and paid up front?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are the digital opportunities, and does it work?
For Africa, it's tricky because not everybody's got access to data. You know, the privileged few, like what Moreira said, there's certain people that are privileged. So there are people that are privileged that can watch things online, but it's not everybody that has got access to data or cheap data for that matter. So in Zimbabwe, it's not everybody that has got access to internet. Yes, they've got phones, they've got smartphones, but they only use their smartphones maybe for just WhatsApp, but not necessarily for them to be able to stream a 1-hour concert. But you know what we know with live music is the enjoyment comes from you being around other people, like you said, the smell of sweat with the guy next to you, the enjoyment, the noise, that is what you enjoy. So that's the magic that comes out of live music. It's not necessarily the fact that you're sitting in your house on your couch or watching it on a big screen. It's different. So digital, yeah, it works. We could possibly need to have a situation where we include digital on top of live so that it becomes hybrid and someone actually has a choice. So when you take away choice from people, no human being wants their choices taken away. You want to have a choice to say, okay, I'm going to watch the show or I'm not going to go watch the show. If I want to go, do I go and watch it live or do I watch it at home on my phone or on my TV? So at least let's work at a situation where we can give people the power to choose. But at the moment, we're not giving people the power to choose. We're just saying digital. But that digital also segregates a lot of people that don't have access to data. But so let's have a situation where everybody has a choice to be able to watch live, to be able to watch digitally, and maybe even digital, it needs to be free. So, but are we going to have telecom companies that are going to zero rate data on people that are watching? No, we're not. But if we say telecoms, everybody who's got access to a smartphone, they can watch without paying for data. That may work, but we're not going to see them because they're in business, and so are we. So it's a big debate, but choice needs to happen. There has to be a situation where people choose.
Rashid and Dudu, do you have any thoughts and feelings about the digital world?
Well, I always say to my younger brothers and sisters that I'm analog, not digital. So that's my claim to I'm analog. And I'm trying to kind of foray into that digital world, but I'm struggling, man. I'm analog. And my experience is in the live music industry. For me, it's, a band and their fans, in that communion. That's where I get my kick from. Having said that, when I looked at the staggering figures of BTS, the Korean pop group, raking in over, $20 million from their stream, where they had 300,000 fans around 66 countries in the world. And I thought, wow, man, I mean, that opens up a whole realm of possibilities. I'd love to see Burna Boy kind of achieve those numbers, or for that matter, any of these young fans. But the same issues that Walter mentioned, access to data, how expensive it is, and of course our consumption habits. I mean, we're very social beings on the continent. And I think, watch that space. It's interesting stuff, but I still prefer to remain analog, to be honest. So can't wait to be back on stage. Yep, 2 of us there. Yep, definitely.
Me too, count me in it.
You're analog as well.
Don't tell me. I'm sending you download icon. Send me a hard copy.
Yeah.
But I think, personally, maybe I'm just prejudiced. which have been a lot of things, a lot of issues around social issues. But
Sorry,
Are
Rashid,
they-
before I forget this,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when, the streaming, download came about, I saw this sign said, you can experience a download, but you can't download an experience, which I thought, so is one of my favorite saying, and you can't download the live experience for me. I mean, you have to be there, that's it.
So yeah, on the streaming, I mean, I'm being prejudiced, but maybe even in the audience, there's musicians that had a decent income. Certainly the musicians I know, which I communicate with, in South Africa haven't made decent living. I only know of one comedian that had 80,000 viewers at 100 Rand a pop, which is a decent. But there are obviously those big names that will draw a million. But I don't know even the audience if there's any musician that made, like
Any perhaps younger
5,000.
musicians?
Excuse me, I just want to add something. Again, we go back to the social dynamics of our continent. You add this comedian with 80,000 viewers and he makes some cash, okay? You spoke about the South Korean band. I just came back from South Korea. Do you know why they achieved those numbers? Number one, because they're exposed, people are there, but the regulation is in place, okay? The money, when you click into that, when you play into that, the money is shifted to the right places. If you come to Mozambique, I'm registered with Sarr, it's not a lie, my recording label is in South Africa. My music is played in Mozambique, but I don't get royalties from Mozambique. So then we come to a second subject. So what I'm trying to say, all the things that we delay in life is not waiting for us, it's moving. Now we have a situation with COVID where we have to go digital. I don't know how it is in Zimbabwe, I know the late Dudu was a good friend of mine. We had him in Mozambique, but I don't know if you get his royalties from Mozambique. I don't believe. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So then comes a second subject matter. So that's why I believe on insisting on investment. We have to stop looking at what we're doing with funds. We don't need funds. We need investors that come and believe in your festival and partner with you and invest. Like they invest in oil and gas and coal, we need investors. So then we start doing like a long-term projects, because when you look at art, music, you look at the short term. Oh, you just want to do a show in a museum? No, there's a career here. There's a process of creativity. There's licensing, okay? There's many things involved. So that's the big challenge. In Mozambique, we have amazing artists. You can go online. I'm not going to mention, otherwise they'll say, oh, promoting, with big followers, big numbers. But trust me, the income doesn't come from that.
Conversion.
I think I can speak personally from my experience when I used to play on stage to a live audience before management and production, is the one thing that we mustn't forget, that yes, we're talking about benefits for the fans and benefits from those that put up the shows, which is us. But there's something that has been taken away from artists, the experience that they get from them presenting their work to a live audience. So I think we focus on how this whole thing has affected us, and we focus on how this whole thing has affected the audience. But I think not a lot is being spoken about on how it's affected what has been taken away from the artist.
What you're talking is happening in tennis and everywhere. Mentally.
So, and what has been taken from the artist is an opportunity for them to present their heart to people, and that happens live. They don't feel that from performing in front of cameras. So, and I think any artist that, it's sad to hear that Big Brother Yoso hasn't performed in 2 years. He must be dying inside, because he gets life from, seeing people enjoying themselves, seeing people dancing to his music, seeing people cry, seeing people happy. You know what I mean? And I think any artist, if you ask any artist that performs in front of people, that is more payment than any amount of money, any amount of clicks that they can get. But to be able to interact with people that are accepting the gift of music that they would have been represented. And I think that's something that we also need to look at and say, hey, you know what, let's consider the musicians and what they have lost, because yes, they get paid eventually and but I think a lot of musicians have gone through a lot of depression and a lot of it's not even just income that they've lost their lives. They've lost, most of these people can't communicate verbally, but their best way of communication is through their instruments, through their music, through expressing themselves. And that has been taken away, and they have no way of expressing themselves now, and they have no way of sharing their hearts to people. And I think that's something that we need to consider as well, that it's a huge part of the whole thing, and it's actually the last part. Nobody even thinks of what we've taken away from the artists, but I just thought that it's something that we also need to look and consider and see how best we can help artists as well in that regard.
Thank you, Walter. Did you have any, before we open the forum up for people to ask questions, because I wanted to allow more time for that, because usually we never have enough time for that. Did you have any other thoughts on this subject of artists and their mental health?
Thank you. You're a genius, Walter, because I've been negotiating with an office in Paris for the past 10 years to bring Yoso to Mozambique, and it's a woman, I won't mention her name. So I have a gig in the pocket for Yoso for 10 years. And
Is that Michelle?
La Gazelle, yes. Sorry, I'm a business, so I'm straightforward. So, and La Gazelle, whatever. So we'll talk. Thank you,
bro.
Walter, I love you, bro. So I have the gig for you. So.
Should we? Do you have any?
Now let's go to
we,
the floor.
Could we bring in some questions? We have an opportunity to speak to some key industry players here.